Welcome to Fully Semi-Automotive. I'm Chris.
I'm Alex.
And we're here today to talk about the first project we're going to try and tackle as this series begins. This is our Factory 5 GTM. And we have wanted to do this one for quite a while. We were pretty excited about it. About 3 years ago, my wife and kids got together and they bought me this piece right here, this roof scoop. And that was my Christmas gift as a promise that we would get to this project one day. And of course, the world being what it is, terrible, COVID hits and we couldn't really do things. And then Factory 5 decided to make it even worse and they discontinued this product completely. The whole GTM line is done with no real hope for resurrection. And we didn't have a kit. So this dream just about died before it ever really got started. We had one piece.
And a hat and some stickers.
And a hat and some stickers and a lot of
the ordering catalog we had checked off. We'd gone through and written out every single part we were going to get, all the add-ons we wanted. We were all set and ready to order it, and then life got in the way and Factory 5 got in the way.
So a lot of hopes and dreams on a very narrow thread. And so we thought there's still a chance people order these things and they don't get to start their projects. So Alex posted on some forums and Facebook groups and just said, does anybody have a kit that they haven't started yet? And everybody on the internet immediately said, yes, I've got a built one. You can buy it here. Or don't do a GTM. What a terrible idea. Build the Cobra, right? If you're going to pick a kit.
For being a supposedly supportive and inclusive group, the Factory 5 groups really don't like the GTM or the GTM people, it seems.
But the first minor miracle of that story is somebody did have one that hadn't really been started yet. They put a couple panels on. We look at those here. They put the rear wheels on. And everything else is boxed and packaged just like it came from the truck. So we were pretty excited about that. And,
minor miracle number 2. It could have been anywhere in the country if it was the right unstarted project where we could go pick it up and basically do all of the work ourselves. Because that's really what we wanted, is we didn't want to just have a fast car. We wanted to build a fast car. Neither of us have a ton of experience actually working on cars. So we figured that being able to just start from scratch with a car that doesn't have a bunch of mechanical issues, a bunch of wiring issues, something that we just get to read the instructions and start putting it together would not necessarily be easier, but would be a little more straightforward than trying to find a car we liked that had issues, diagnose all the issues, fix all the things that are broken, buy all the new parts that it needs, and try to fix it as we go. We just figured it would be more fun and we'd have a better understanding of how to work on other projects if we just built one from scratch, as close to from scratch as you can feasibly get as possible. So for the right kit, we would have driven, literally across the country if it had been the right kit at the right price.
Love road trips.
So we were all set and prepared to drive, at least 15, 16 hours to go pick it up and then 15, 16 hours back. Come to find out, it was 15 or 16 minutes up the road from my house. So could have been anywhere in the country, and it just happened to be in our own backyard, basically.
So that kind of sealed the deal. We had one found and decided if it's right here, that's a sign, let's do this thing. And we bought the kit. So here it sits. In all its future glory. And I'm really looking forward to driving it. When I say I'm a car guy, I'm a driver. I'm not as interested in putting them together. but I'm interested in spending the time and doing that with Alex. So he's got all the details and can tell you what the numbers mean, but I'm just, I think they look cool. I want to go fast.
And I want to make sure he doesn't die going fast. So minor miracle number 3 about the kit acquisition was that the guy that bought the kit also bought the donor car, because Factory 5 builds these kits with the intention of you buying a car and tearing a bunch of parts off of it and then installing them onto the kit. So their Cobra kits use Mustangs, and I think the Daytona kit uses a Mustang as well. Their hot rods use parts off of various cars. The 818 kit used the Subaru WRX, but this, being the supercar of their lineup, actually used the C5 Corvette as its donor. So you're supposed to source either lightly wrecked or poor condition Corvette and rip it apart and throw a bunch of pieces off of the Corvette into here. Things like the knuckles for the wheels, the control arms, the horn, the steering column, a bunch of different parts. So we were kind of preparing to find a C5 Corvette after we found a kit, but the guy that we bought the kit from was actually a Corvette shop owner. He specializes in working on Corvettes, so he had already sourced all of the donor parts. The only thing it didn't come with was an engine and the transaxle, because this is a mid-engined car, so it does get a transaxle, rear-wheel drive only. But yeah, so this is the instruction manual. If you can see that, it's very thick. And we actually get to start about a third of the way through it because the previous owner did already strip a donor car for all the parts that we need. And that's about the first third of the book, is just how to tear apart a C5 Corvette for all the things you need to build this. But so as far as our future plans go, thinking long-term about what the GTM is going to need and what we're going to have to put into it. We do need an engine and we do need a transaxle.
If you got a spare, let us know.
Yeah. So as far as the engine goes, the one we're currently planning on getting is a 427 LS from Blueprint Engines. Factory 5 and Blueprint had an agreement where they were going to build some engine packages specifically for Factory 5 cars. As far as we're aware, you can still order those. That site is still up, and they still have all of their documentation on how to order an engine specifically for a GTM. So as of right now, that's what we're planning on doing.
Yeah, and you do need a specific engine build for the GTM because it sits so low. Like the
you do need a special oil pan.
The oil pan has to be shortened, and so it's not a
straight up
yeah
crate LS. It does need a little bit of modification, but so they have one that's specific for the GTM. It pushes about 625 horsepower at the crank, and I think it's 550 foot-pounds of torque. So pretty beefy built engine, all forged internals. So that's what we're looking at as far as the engine goes.
And we decided that the whole thing was going to weigh less than 2,500 pounds.
That is what Factory 5 states, is that it should weigh, depending on the options you put into it and whatever modifications you make to the kit, it should be around the 2,500 pound mark. So with 625-ish horsepower at the crank, it's going to be pretty zippy. And so the original transaxle option for these come with an adapter plate to go to a Porsche G50 transaxle. But we actually decided that we're not going to go with the G50 just because we don't really want to source a used transmission and have to trust that it's in good enough shape to hold up to that amount of power, and they weren't really designed for that much power in the first place. So we're going to go with, and again, this is just the plan for right now. Yeah. Things might change, but right now we're planning on going with a Mendiola Racing 5-speed transaxle. So it's built specifically for high horsepower applications, and it is already designed to bolt straight to the LS without an adapter plate, so it makes things a little simpler in that aspect. And these cars have been built with Mendiola transaxles before, so we know it can be.
Yeah, one of the recommended.
Yeah, it is one of the recommended options if you're building a higher horsepower application, because these were designed to take any Chevy V8 motor, really, any of the LS series for sure. So that people put LS3s, LS1s, LS7s, all sorts of stuff in these. But we're kind of aiming for not a pure race car. Obviously, we want it to go fast. It needs to sound good, it needs to go fast, it needs to look good. But since we're not purely going to be track driving, this is mostly going to be a street car that you could take to the track and have some fun with on a weekend. And not really have to worry about changing too much about the tuning of the car to take it to the track. So we're trying to kind of balance it between high power and streetability, and having parts that are a little overbuilt for what we're going to be using them for, just to increase the reliability. So we don't have to worry about things blowing up if we took it to the track, and having the car down for a month or two for a rebuild at some point.
We never have to be embarrassed at a stoplight.
Yeah, that's the real goal. Is the only way that you could be embarrassed at a stoplight is if the tires don't get enough grip, but then you're just doing a burnout. So
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the general overview of how we got the kit and kind of what the plans for it are. Near-term plans. We've got some parts on order for the steering rack. The steering geometry on these cars is actually a little weird from the factory. They use the C5 Corvette donor, but they include a Fox Body Mustang manual steering rack. There's no power steering in this car. Some of the people who have built these have said that for racing applications, they recommend adding power steering, but again, since we're doing it mostly as a street car, we're going to leave that out, leave it simple. But with the manual rack for the Mustang going to Corvette knuckles, you have to convert from the Mustang inner tie rod to a Corvette outer tie rod, which they don't really do. They're different threads, and the spindle on the knuckle is a different size. So we've ordered some parts for that. We've actually ordered parts that allow you to lower the tie rod attachment point on the knuckle, because these have problems with bump steer, where when you hit a bump and the wheel actually moves inside the wheel well, it will move the steering rack. It'll cause the wheel to basically bounce in your hands as you hit bumps, which is not something you really want to have happen if you're doing 180 down the road. So to fix that, you have to lower where the tie rod attaches to the knuckle, and you have to raise the steering rack. So we've got some offset bushings that'll let us raise the steering rack up a little bit on order. We've got the adjustable tie rods, like I said. We've got some adapters that let us go from Heim joints to this Mustang rack. So the first kind of steps that we're going to be taking on building this car is, for one, inventorying all of our parts, making sure we actually have everything and ordering anything that we're missing. And then we're going to be installing control arms, upper and lower, on the front. They've already been installed on the back. Like Dad said, the rear suspension has already been installed. It's sitting on its rear wheels. We'd really like to see it sitting at its ride height, so we're going to try and get the front wheels installed. And then once we've done that, we get to pull all the bodywork off and start kind of prepping some of the electrical lines, some of the cooling lines and stuff, because this is still a front-mounted radiator but a rear-mounted engine. So you got to run cooling and electrical controls and all that kind of stuff. So all of that is going to be coming hopefully in the near future. But for right now, we're just going to get started on kind of going through some parts. We'll get some footage of that, do a little time lapse, and we'll come back to you when we've got something interesting to share.
All right, sounds good. found some stuff. We got an update. We went through all of our boxes and our various different shelves and found some components, so we started laying them out around the car. So we've got some of the A-arms out. We've got the lower control arm, upper control arm. We've got coilover shocks. These are Coney coilovers. They come with the kit. You can see the springs are actually labeled as Factory 5 Racing springs. We found the camber bolts that go on the lower control arm. You can see that they'll go right through there. And then we found, Dad actually found this whole box of hardware. And lots of these are bolts off the donor car. But what we're really looking for is this bracket and this bracket. So when these cars originally shipped, you were supposed to install the coilover with the reservoir at the top. And then they found out from Coney that you actually shouldn't do that. And they released an update with these little brackets that go in the mounting point, the upper mounting point for the coilover. And you gotta drill a hole through here for a bolt. We're missing 3 of these, but we have one, so we can measure it and cut some new ones if we need to. If we don't find them in the box as we're digging. But these will go right up here, and that just kicks the shock mounting point out a little bit so that you can flip them over and mount them the correct way with the reservoir at the bottom. And then this other bracket that I pulled out goes across here on the lower control arm, and that's actually the lower mounting point for the shock, so it'll go in there and hold it all together. So we also have the steering rack kind of sitting roughly where it's going to go. We do have to replace the bushings on that, so it'll get pulled back out, and we'll do some work on that. And we also have to find, there's some bushings that go in these lower control arms, and I did see them when we were packing the car up, so I know we have them. I just haven't gotten to the box that actually has them yet. So back to the time lapse, and we'll let you know if we find anything else. We found a box of parts. We went through this tote right here and tore a bunch of stuff out of it. And so we're looking at our front suspension here. We've got some Prothane polyurethane bushings for the control arms. And there's this pack, unopened Prothane, I don't know if you can see that, Corvette RR spring cushions. I assume that means rear. And then there's this box that's full of brand new Prothane bushings, which is labeled as Corvette C5 RR C-arm bushings. So again, assuming RR means rear and C-arm is control arms. So if we look in the car, you guys can't see that at all because there's no light. But in the car, the bushings on the control arms have not been replaced. I don't know if you can see down in there, but you can probably see that one. Yeah, they have not been replaced. So, assuming that all of that is for the rear control arms, but the weird thing is that there's more bushings in the box than it seems like there should be for the rear. So we might have to jack up the back of the car and take the wheels off to get a better look at what we're trying to figure out. Because there's a bunch of pairs, and then there's 3 different sizes of these solid bushings. So that's the one that's confusing me. Is why are there 3 of them
And there's 2 different sizes of these 2-piece bushings. So I'd understand if it was 4 different sizes of bushing, right? Because you've got 4 different connection points for the control arms. I'm just not sure where each of these goes. I'm really not sure where those go. I've never seen those. So might have to do some research and figure that out on next week's episode. But for right now, we've got basically the whole front suspension laid out. We gotta find some bolts still, figure out which ones actually go where. But as of right now, we've got our suspension layout, all the parts laid out. We gotta swap a ball joint. This is a new ball joint on this control arm, but it hasn't been pressed in all the way. And then story back on the driver's side is that this is an old ball joint that needs to get pressed out. And then over here in this box, we have a new Mevotech, I think that's how you pronounce that, brand new ball joint, which matches the one that's partially installed on the passenger side. So we'll get that swapped out. And then we'll have to do these other ball joints on the steering knuckle, and get those cleaned up. Probably refresh the brakes. Maybe do new brakes. Are we doing new brakes?
We might do new brakes. We're gonna see how much that engine costs.
Yeah. So that's where we're at. Might call it for this week and pick back up once we get a few more things figured out and we've got a little bit more to explain. So catch you in the next one.